Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, Helping Veterans Thrive When Returning Home. We're going to give everybody a couple minutes to log on, and then we'll get started. So please bear with us. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. This is John Rader from relink.org. I want to welcome you all to our webinar today, Helping Veterans Thrive When Returning Home. In a moment, we're going to hear from retired Justice Stratton on the Veterans Courts and the history involving that. And then we will also hear from retired Sergeant Dave Corlett of the Cincinnati Police on the really fascinating deflection program that he created in Cincinnati, and he will tell you how that came to be. First, I wanted to talk about our organization a little bit. We are relink.org. We're a nonprofit organization in Winsburg, Ohio. We have a free anonymous website database with about 15,000 resources in all 88 counties of Ohio. And the resources are for folks in reentry, folks with addiction issues, victims of human trafficking, women and children. But more importantly, anyone who needs help can go to our website and look for resources. It's very, very easy to do so. You can see some of our categories: addiction recovery, anti-human trafficking, food, clothing, and furniture, fair chance employers, counseling services, family support. So it's very easy to find resources on our website. What you can do is search by city, zip code, or county. And then once you find that, then you choose your category of care, which I'll show you in a second. And then once you select that category and click on it, it brings up different options such as treatment or housing or harm reduction prevention services. Excuse me. So it's really that easy. These are our categories. We have addiction recovery resources, reentry resources to help you get back on your feet, anti-human trafficking resources for support, family services, emergency and crisis, basic needs. Under that would be food, clothing, shelter, behavioral health. In preparation for this webinar, I was looking at our behavioral health resources in the 7 major counties in Ohio. And what I found is we have about a little over 1,000 different organizations in those 7 major counties, and they provide over 2,500 resources. So there's all sorts of help available. So one of our big pushes this year is with organizations that are listed on our website. They can go in and edit their information. If something changes, they can go in and make the changes. All you have to do is log into our website, and there's a tab that you can select. It's provider login and sign up. You click on that and you can go in and update your information. If the contacts change or the services, you add services, you can check those. And then when a search is done, all those services, if someone picks that service, your organization will show up there. So it's really easy to do. But as always, if you have any trouble doing that, please be sure to reach out to us. We're more than happy to help you correct anything or edit anything, add things, what have you. One thing we are asked quite a bit is when people register on our website, they'll put in their contact information, their phone number and email. Please rest assured that we do nothing with those. We do not give them out to any other service. We do not sell them to anyone. We are not in that business. So your information is on our website, and that's the only thing we do with it. So that being said, here's our contact information. Info at relink.org is our email address. There's our phone number. We invite you to check out our social media accounts, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. We're continuously posting on those, and hopefully you'll find them some relevant and interesting articles. So that's a little bit about Relink. At this point, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I want to introduce our first speaker, retired Justice Evelyn Stratton, who is going to talk about the Veterans Courts and the history of the Veterans Courts. Welcome, Judge Stratton.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me on this program. It sounds like we've got a very large sign-up group, a diverse group, and hopefully some of the information I share will lead you to other pieces of information. So my presentation is mostly going to be about how we got started and what Ohio is doing and what resources are out there. And hopefully you can connect with some of those resources and be able to use some of them to your advantage. So I've been involved in the mental health space for probably almost 40 years. I was a trial judge here in Franklin County. Started off actually as a missionary kid in Thailand, born and raised, and lived there for my first 18 years, going to a Christian-run boarding school in Malaysia and South Vietnam, first in South Vietnam, and then when the war got too bad in Malaysia. So I came here when I was 18, had no exposure to mental health issues in the small villages I grew up in. Didn't see it in college, although I know it's prevalent now, and really didn't see it until I got elected to the Common Pleas bench and saw it front and center and had no idea what to do with all these people in front of me that had serious mental health issues. So I started my work campaigning on that and trying to develop veterans courts. And I connected with Lieutenant Woody, who was working with crisis intervention teams. And we started promoting veterans courts. And I started with the national group promoting promoting mental health courts on the national level. And I was speaking at a conference in Washington, and I sat next to a guy from the VA, and he said, well, we're trying to start veterans courts. And I knew there was a court of appeals for benefits to appeal denial of benefits. So when I asked him about it, I said, well, that's basically a drug court or a mental health court, but with a vet in it. So we are part of a conference we put on for the bigwigs in Washington to sell them on the concept. And then I was appointed to a VA committee to set up the veterans courts and try to get those started and to create a program called the Veterans Justice Outreach Specialist. So the VA had specialists that would go into prisons and find veterans that were about ready to reenter, try to connect them with services, but they had nothing on the entry side. And so the VJO is basically a social worker mostly that is connected to one of the major hospital systems, the VA hospital systems. And their job is to find veterans coming into the veterans court system or the veterans or just into the court system, period, and try to connect them with services. And so we had 54 major veteran hospitals in the country. Ohio had 5. So we got 5 VJOs to start. And we said to the VA, do not require these to be part of a veterans treatment court because a lot of places don't have them. They're just brand new. Any veteran that enters the court system should have access to the VJO. So they did set up that way. So we started with Ohio, putting our first veterans court together. Judge Alt in Richland County did our first one. And I started promoting them all across both Ohio and the country. And the VJO program has really grown. We have, I think, we may have 15 now in Ohio. Several of the major cities have more than one. Maybe it's not quite that many, but they can connect your veteran with services. So then we found that a lot of veterans don't identify as veterans. You can't ask, are you a veteran? You have to ask, do you have military service? That needs to be your intake question. But Justice Kennedy is fond of a story she talked about, Chief Justice Kennedy, when she talked to her Butler sheriff, and she was promoting this program called the Veterans Reentry Search System. And it's where you send your list of Social Security numbers to the VA every night or once a week or how often you set up your program. And they will match it with a record of military service and send it back to you and immediately ping the VJO connected to your area to get services. And they had in Butler identified 2 veterans. And the sheriff said, that's really funny you say that, because I had some of my sheriff staff come to me in jail and say, we've got a bunch of vets here that have not identified. Well, how do you know? Well, we were in the military. We served in Afghanistan and Iraq and Iran, and we know, how they behave and how they talk and how they bond. And you got more vets. So they put in the VRSS system, and in 48 hours, they identified 22 more vets that had not told them they were a veteran. So we're trying to get this everywhere in Ohio, and the Chief Justice and I have been pushing this forever and ever, and for multiple reasons. The inertia, whatever, jails, very few of our jails, only maybe 20 are actually doing this. So we're now working on a statute. We found out Texas and Indiana require it by statute. It's going to be an easy sell, because all you do is put in the system, which we'll provide training for. And once it's up and operating, it's automatic. And every veteran that you can identify in your court system that is qualified for VA services is one less veteran you have to support with local dollars and local resources that are often very scarce, especially in your small counties, where some of the veterans' VA services are very strong. For example, you can get your veteran that's been arrested a health exam. Most of your regular arrestees never get a health exam unless they have a particular problem. You could get mental health care, you could get drug and treatment, you could get employment, you could get housing, a lot of robust services, but you have to start by identifying them. So that's one of the things we're working on with the legislature, and keep tuned for that. We think it'll be a very easy sell, because it's just will bring so many benefits into Ohio. So we're now up to 25 veterans courts, but like I said, any court can access the VJO and use their services. Any jail can do the VRSS system. And, and so way back when I was on the bench and I started, pushing veterans courts in Ohio, I found out that we had different agencies that did something with veterans. This one did this one did that, but none of them were kind of talking to each other. So I put together years ago, the first probably 10, 12, 15, maybe 15 years ago, the first Ohio Veterans Conference. I had it at the court, and it was basically connect the dots. I had the Department of Mental Health talk about what services they offer veterans. I had the newly created Department of Veteran Services talk. I had the corrections people talk, and we were just starting with veterans courts. And so I did 4 of them, every year while I was at the court. And then as we started getting more veterans courts, I think the 4th one, we really featured the veterans court process and everything. And then Chief Justice Kennedy and I became very close friends early on, before she was even elected. And she was a former cop and really understood the military culture. And she took up the mantle with a vengeance. I mean, she has just been relentless, visiting all these different counties, talking to the judges about starting a veterans court. We did one aimed at training judges how to do a veterans court through the Bar Association. And then she approached me and said, why don't we pick up these statewide veterans conferences? So we did several of them together, and we are now going to do our 10th one this November. We do them the 1st November, first Thursday after Veterans Day. The one we just did, which has been taped and is again on my website, which I'll give you in a bit, Sergeant Corlett spoke at it. So we focused on deflection on this one. We focused on how can we get to veterans before they get into the criminal justice system. And it was really one of our best ever. We really had some great speakers, both nationally and in Ohio, and talked about how you can prevent them from getting into the criminal justice system. All the others had focused on other issues. Our next one, we're talking about the subject that we're going to have on the next one, and we're looking very closely at a special populations topic for November. I found out there are a lot of aging vets that don't have anywhere to go. We do have some that can go into the two veterans homes, but that takes only a fraction of the veterans. We have like the 4th or 5th highest population of veterans in the country. That percentage seems to vary depending on who my source is, but we have a lot of veterans. They're aging, so that's a special population. We may focus on PTSD as a special population, those with TBI, those with prosthetics as special populations. We're talking about suicide as a special population, and talking about Black veterans because they very strongly distrust the veterans VA system, so they have some harder issues of access. Maybe families and children of veterans. So we're tossing around a bunch of ideas. So stay tuned for that. It should be a very exciting opportunity to get a lot more training, and we do them in person and by Zoom. So you can attend remotely if you need to. Also, one of the things I stood up very early on with Dr. Chris Ann Gordon was Resurrecting Lives. It was a nonprofit that focuses on traumatic brain injury, and it's still going strong. I'm not quite as involved with it, but it's focusing a lot of employment issues. And then there is a whole bunch of other things that we started. We started the Military and Veterans Affairs Committee at the Ohio State Bar Association. I helped get that stood up, and it's still going strong. It focuses more on legislation. It focuses on some training issues. One of the presentations we just had was from Colonel Shank. Colonel Shank was second in command at the Ohio National Guard, and he retired and took a job with veterans, but he's sort of their point man for all their veteran programs. And they are working with us to look at trying to have a special hiring program for veterans that are in veterans treatment courts. They make great employees because they are regularly tested. They have to make sure that they comply with all the requirements, or they don't, or they get the possibility of going back to jail. So they've got motivation. They got somebody supervising. We find that those under supervision make very good employees. They're going to try to have a special track to get veterans employed in the different locations they have in Ohio. And if this works well, they may take this program nationally. So we're very excited about that. And a second committee that we have is the Veterans Treatment Court Committee. 13 years ago, then Attorney General DeWine approached me about starting a statewide statewide mental health and criminal justice committee. And so I had a court committee, I closed it down, moved everybody over to a joint committee with him. We did that for 8 years together. And then AG Yost asked me to take it over. So I'm in my 5th year now with Yost. We have 15 very active committees. And one of the slides we'll show you in a bit is the Attorney General Task Force and how to join. You can join more than one committee if you're interested in some law enforcement, if you're interested in juveniles, aging. We have 15 different committees, but we do have a veterans specific committee that does some really, really good work. And so that's one that you can also join. But another exciting thing is that because I was working closely with AG Yost and his staff and the Military Resource Project, which Dave Corlett is going to really focus on, one of the things that we did is the AG became very interested in presenting veterans at the national level. He was head of the AG National Attorney General's Association. They get to pick a project. His project was serving those who serve us. And he did a lot of education and training for AGs nationally on veterans. And Dave's going to talk about one of the presentations he made at that AG national meeting. So we're spreading the word beyond Ohio, which we're pretty excited about. There's also some great nonprofits that you could connect with. We featured some of those in some of the different seminars or webinars conferences that we did in November. One was Stockyard Hands. Stockyard Hands is in Delaware. It was started by a veteran with some severe PTSD issues who found that working with horses really helped him and calmed him. And he started this whole program that works with veterans and horses. And the Judge Hemeter, who is the Veterans Court judge in Delaware, sends a lot of her people in her court to that program. There's a lot of nonprofits that do like retreats that help families and veterans deal with the trauma that they deal with. There's just a lot of exciting things to go on. And so I'll have them put up an infographic. These are things that we send out under a project I call Stepping Up, but it just has a lot of those resources on it that are on the national level. So if you'll put that up on the screen, I'll talk about a little bit of those resources. Anybody can, there it goes. Okay. We're coming. So this is the attorney. Okay, this first one is the Attorney General Task Force I was just talking about. You can see on the screen a lot of the different committees that you could join. We have 450 members. We have 2 co-chairs. We have judges. We have doctors. We have mental health staff. We have AG staff. We have a lot of very good co-chairs for each one of these committees. But you can see at the very bottom is the Veterans Courts and Military Affairs Committee. If you want to join, at the very bottom is Carolyn Bevan's contact information that you could just send her and say, I want to join this particular committee. So that is one of our resources that really can connect you with a lot of other people in the field as well. Especially, there's a lot of Veterans Court judges that attend this. Its co-chair is Judge Loxley from Warren County, very active, and Dr. Rita Wood, who's with the VA in Cleveland. So we've got both treatment and courtside representatives co-chairs. And then the next one I want to show you is some information that has some resources. This is Ohio Means Jobs. There are Job and Family Services has offices in almost every county that help people get jobs. But then there's funding on the national level that allows people to let's say you're a veteran and you have special needs. You have a disability, you have a criminal background. You can go to the specific desk that is funded nationally but run by Ohio to work on employment assistance specific to veterans with issues. And so here's some of the resources that you can get for help for unemployment. And then the next slide deck I'll show you is the Veterans Justice Outreach Specialist Program. This kind of explains how that system works, how you can get involved. You do not have to have a Veterans Court to have a VJO. There is a VJO assigned to your county. If you go on one of the links there, you can find out who is your VJO in your county. But the links at the bottom will give you some of the services. It'll give you the AG Task Force. It'll give you the Department of Veterans Affairs, where you can get a lot of information, healthcare. The Ohio Department of Veterans Services lists a ton of resources, so that's a very valuable resource to look at. Ohio Veterans Courts gives you a listing of all the courts in the system. So those are some of the resources that you can tap into if you want to get some more information. And also, I have a blog. There's a guy named Pete Miller. I met him when I was campaigning. He's a retired aeronautical engineer who worked on the space shuttle. So I call him my personal rocket scientist. He was obviously retired way too early, was too bored. He just took on all the veterans work we are doing nationally in Ohio with a vengeance. He created a blog. It's called estrattonconsulting.org, estrattonconsulting.org. I'll put that in the chat. And if you want to get on there, you can get hours of webinars and training and resources that we have done with veterans. And you can get a lot of stuff in the mental health field beyond the veterans world itself for resources. So I'll put that in that chat thing as well. So those are some of the things that we can offer to you and we can help you with. And there's just so much happening in Ohio. We are really a national leader in the veterans work we are doing. And so I'm real excited about that. So I don't know if anyone has any questions. If they don't, I will pass it on to Dave Corlett. And one of the things I want to say about Dave is I heard about his program years ago, was so impressed with it. Justice Kennedy, now Chief Justice, was so impressed with it. So we went to AG Yost to say, hey, this is a great program. We ought to do it more than, just in Cincinnati. We ought to pull Dave in, et cetera, et cetera. And the AG became very interested in it. And he appointed a staff person to really run with it. Carrie Bartonek is her name. And she's worked with Dave to really try to expand that and also try to expand the idea of how to do this nationally. So we brought this to the AG, and like I said, he was very excited about it and has really run with it. So if there are no questions then, and I see none in the chat box, I'll pass the baton on to Dave. I have to leave a little bit early, only about 10 or 15 minutes early, but I'll be on for some of it in case any other questions pop up. And I'm very happy that we were been able to feature Dave in several ways because he's just been amazing in this program that he's put together. And I think it's making a real impact. So Dave, take it away.
Thank you so much, Justice Stratton. If anyone has any questions, please. A question just popped up. Where will the conference be hosted?
I believe this year we're going to try to host it at the Ohio Supreme Court. We've been doing it at the Villa Milano, and we've been having to raise some funds to put it on because we've not done it on our own. But now that Kennedy is Chief Justice, she's taking it back to the court where I had the first 4, where we can use staff resources and everything. So we think it will be at the Ohio Supreme Court, and usually they try to have a Zoom option as well for attendance. So stay tuned for news at 11 on that.
Well, thank you so much, Justice.
Oh, I see one more question. Oh, just a thank you. Okay.
Oh, wait, there's one.
That was a thank you.
Can I please get a copy of these resources? I would like to share with the American Legion Post 25 in Washington Courthouse, Ohio. My husband, John King, as commander, was in the Air Force. This would be wonderful information to share with the group at American Legion. I'm a retired victim advocate from ODRC, and reentry has always had a special place in my heart.
So the video and the slides are being recorded. They will be sent to you, so you can look on the 3 slide decks that I showed you and get a lot of the resources that we've talked about. So that would be a way to go.
Yeah, we will send this all out to all the attendees. So rest assured, you will receive them. Let's see. I think that was it. Yep. Okay, now we will hear from Dave and his really interesting program that he started.
Thanks, John. I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I want to just say thanks to Judge Stratton and to Justice Stratton and Justice Kennedy. They've been incredible supporters of mine, and I wish they would stop setting the bar so high because people are disappointed after they hear me talk after such a big buildup. But I thank you very much, and I appreciate all the support you've given me. You two have definitely been champions to help my community and help my brothers and sisters. So thank you very, very much. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. Make sure I remember how to do it here. So everybody should be able to see.
Yeah, we can see it, Dave. You're good.
Go back one to the beginning. There we go. Now we're at the beginning of the world here. One of the things I want to start with is Justice Stratton mentioned the VJO program. The VJO program stands for Veteran Justice Outreach Worker, and they are assigned to every county in the country. So there is a VJO available to you, and they are just an incredible resource. Without them, my program probably would not have existed, or would at least not have been anywhere near as successful. The VJO program that the justices were involved in starting was my primary route into the VA system and VA resources, because when I started this, I didn't know anything about them. And if you notice here at the bottom of the first slide, you've got Mr. Ron Michelson. Ron Michelson was that VJO that was instrumental in the beginning of my program. So we'll start with an introduction. My name's Dave Corlett. I am a retired Cincinnati Police Department sergeant. Prior to that, let me see, I was a United States Army veteran of Operations Desert Shield, Desert Storm. So I spent the early part of the 90s in Iraq. And when I came back, I left the military because my wife didn't really enjoy that deployment. And I decided to become a Cincinnati policeman. In 1999, I got promoted to sergeant. And I was a sergeant for approximately 26 years, 27 years before retiring in just June of last year. So I spent 31 years with the Cincinnati Police Department, 27 of those in middle management. And in 2014, I was fortunate enough to have the idea to start what is now known as the Military Liaison Program in the city of Cincinnati. I'm going to give you an idea how we started, why we started. But as I tell you these stories and you think about how they could be useful, or I hope you find them useful, understand that there's no cookie cutter to the program that we ran in Cincinnati. Everybody's department is different. Everybody's county is different. Everybody's jails are different. You have to take maybe what we did and find a way to mold it to what works for you with the resources you have available. And that's where the Attorney General's office comes in, and Carrie Bartunik is an incredible resource for that. She will actually come to town and assign some of her staff to help you set up programs. And we work very closely with the Veterans Court treatment programs. That's an important part of what we do, is getting to know the veterans that are in the treatment court, and helping to guide them through that court and after the court. But the reason I was at the conference this year in Columbus with Justice Stratton was to talk about deflection. And we're going to get into that a little bit, because that was the primary purpose of my program. Before we get any further, I want to take a second to honor these three soldiers. These are the three soldiers who were lost in Jordan just the other day. Three Army soldiers, three heroes that are no longer with us, and offer prayers to their families. And then just take one extra second for my own airman. That's my own airman who is in Iraq right now, dealing with all of this and the aftermath. So we're anxiously awaiting his return, which is supposed to be in March or April, but we'll see what happens. But if you've got an extra second, and if you're the praying kind, throwing one out there for my special operations airmen, I would appreciate it. All right, why do we exist? So I don't want to just read slides to you, but the gist is every year, 200,000 men and women leave military service. They transition back into normal civilian life. Everybody's not prepared to transition back into normal life. And for those of you who are veterans, you probably remember your transition. Mine at this point was 35 years ago. And I still remember the emotions and the struggles that went with transition. It was one of the most difficult times of my life. The previous 4.5 years had all been planned for me and directed for me. I knew where to be, when to be, how to be, where my paycheck came from. I could go to the doctor whenever I wanted. All of that ends when you leave military service. So 200,000, roughly 200,000 men and women every year leave the service to a completely new world. Some of them struggle with employment. Some of them struggle with underemployment. There's mental health issues. There's substance abuse issues. All of those things that sometimes lead to the criminal justice system. And the idea behind the Military Liaison Program was simply, what are we doing to steer them away from the criminal justice system? Is the criminal justice system necessary to guide these military veterans back into productive lifestyle? And the answer is no. The criminal justice system is not always needed, but you have to understand and have some idea of what you're going to do or how you can help these veterans prior to getting them into the criminal justice system. All right, so we're going to talk about how and why I put together the Military Liaison Program in Cincinnati. It was not something I thought about for a long time. It was not something that I had been wanting to do, or I am a religious man, and I believe that this traffic stop occurred for a reason, and God put the idea in my head, and I did what I did because it's what I was meant to do. I was a night shift supervisor in an area of Cincinnati we call Over the Rhine. And Over the Rhine at the time was one of the most violent neighborhoods in the country. We were averaging a homicide every other night and 2 or 3 shootings a night. High drug activity area, high prostitution area, just a high crime area altogether. Not somewhere that you would routinely take your family out to dinner. So there was a place in this area at 30 East Liberty known as the Shell Station, which is the center of the known universe in Cincinnati for anybody on here from Cincinnati. All crime begins and ends at the Shell Station in Cincinnati. So if you're in Cleveland and you had a homicide yesterday, check the tapes at 30 East Liberty. Your suspect probably went through there at some point. But I would routinely sit there in my patrol car because it was central. It was a central location to the area that I was responsible for as a supervisor. And I would hang out there because it would reduce crime at the Shell Station. It would keep some of the people that they didn't want hanging out on the lot out of the lot. It would make the employees more comfortable. And it was easy access for me to get anywhere in my district when any of my officers needed supervisory assistance. On this particular night, I watched a car circle the block for about 15 minutes. I mean, just every 3 or 4 minutes, this car drove by the Shell Station. And at one point, the driver and I even made eye contact as he went by. And in police work, that's kind of a clue. Something's going on. This guy's searching for something, whether it's narcotics or whether it's prostitution, or he's searching for something he probably shouldn't be searching for. So after about the 8th or 9th or 10th time he went by me, I decided, well, that's enough. I'm going to find out what he's doing before he gets into trouble or something bad happens. I pulled out behind him, waited for a traffic violation, and I initiated a traffic stop and put it out over the radio. While I was putting it out over the radio, this young man immediately exited his car and started to approach my car. For any law enforcement out there, anybody who has any knowledge, that's a no-no. That's a big red flag for us, and we tend to react very quickly. So I jumped out of my car and I started shouting commands at the young man to get back in his car. And we made eye contact almost immediately as I exited my car. And I'm going to give you a little background. So my rank that I was wearing at the time resembles that of an Army first sergeant. It was 3 stripes with 2 underneath rockers and a diamond in the middle. It means something totally different than the military, but it does resemble that of a first sergeant. So as I jumped out of my car and started shouting commands at this young man, he took a position of parade rest and addressed me as first sergeant. So the FBI would call that a clue, and I very quickly recognized that this young man was either in the military or was just recently in the military, and there was a definite military connection to this young man. So I approached him at that point, and as I got closer, he stood at a position of attention, and we started our conversation. And I asked him what he was doing in the neighborhood and what was going on. And he started out with the fact that he was lost. He told me he was lost. And I'm an inner city policeman who worked in a bad neighborhood, and you would be absolutely shocked at how many people get off the highway at the wrong place and end up lost in a high narcotics area. It's amazing. So I knew he wasn't lost, and I kind of jumped on him about that a little bit. And I asked him what was going. He told me he was 6 months out of the military. 6 months out of the military, and he really tried to stick with that story that he was lost. So I decided to use the military aspect to my advantage. And since he was going to address me as first sergeant, I acted like a first sergeant, and I jumped down his throat with both feet, and I told him that he was an embarrassment to me as a veteran, and he was an embarrassment to the community, to the veteran community. And that he had made decisions in his life that were just unacceptable, and he needed to correct them. Was that the best approach? Looking back, I don't know, probably not. But at the time, I thought that would be useful. It was useful enough that it broke through his barrier, and the young man started to cry. And he then admitted to me that he had an issue with narcotics. He was down there looking for narcotics. He had a classic story. He had been injured in Afghanistan or Iraq. I don't recall which one. The VA had put him on painkillers and then taken him off the painkillers, which led him to a heroin addiction. And that's what he was searching for, he was searching for heroin. We had made a connection at that point, and we were having a very honest conversation about his life and the life choices that he had made and where they could lead. And it was at that very moment that I recognized that this young man would have taken any guidance I had to give him. If I had the ability to take him up to the VA and check him into inpatient treatment, he would have gone. If I'd have told him to put his hands behind his back, he's going to jail, he would have gone. And if I'd have simply said, hey, get in my car, I'm going to take you home to your mother and we're going to have a discussion, he would have gone. But the unfortunate part of that evening and that traffic stop was that my realization that I didn't have any of those things. I didn't have a single thing in my tool belt to help this young man. I was not prepared to take him anywhere for treatment. I was not prepared to take him to jail because that's not where he needed to be. I was not prepared to do anything for him other than chastise him about his life decisions. I put him back in his car and I sent him on his way, and I told him, not to let me see him again. And I'm sure, I scared the daylights out of him. I went back to my office, sat down at my desk. I looked at one of my friends who was also an Army veteran. And I told him that I had failed. And he kind of looked at me funny and thought, well, first of all, you would never say that to me, but you have. So I guess I need to ask, what did you fail at? I failed at helping that young man. And I was a senior supervisor in the Cincinnati Police Department, 20 years as a middle manager, super traffic or patrol supervisor. I'm a combat veteran. If I don't know how to help that young man, who in the police department does? And we as policemen are coming into contact with veterans constantly at this point in time. This was 2014 when this occurred. It was during the height of Iraq and Afghanistan. We were running into veterans at the bars, getting into fights. We were running into veterans at home, getting into fights with their spouse, having family-related issues. We were running into veterans just in every criminal justice fashion you could imagine. And I think a lot of it was related to issues from their service, not necessarily criminal behavior. So that night, sitting in my office with my other sergeant who was an Army veteran, and we pulled in a third sergeant who was an Army veteran, I decided that we were going to do better. That was the last time I was going to fail that way. And I started forming relationships through my position in the police department to help the veterans I would come in contact with in the future. And it grew so quickly and so easily that it was just a natural fit to what we were doing. First place I went was up to the VA, and I sat down with the VA director and a couple of the VA policemen, and the VA director looked at me and she said, "Where have you been?" And I said, "Where have I been?" And she said, "Well, we knew that you guys were coming in contact with veterans. We just didn't know how to approach you to connect the veterans you're coming in contact with to our services." So it was an incredible relationship that formed almost immediately with the VA, but yet I didn't understand the VA. I didn't know all the programs. I didn't know all the systems. I didn't know all the requirements. And that came very shortly after when I was able to connect with my local VJO at the Veterans Treatment Court. Our Veterans Treatment Court judge, Melissa Powers at the time, was a friend of mine from when she was a brand new prosecutor and I was a brand new policeman. And she invited me to attend Veterans Treatment Court. And I met Mr. Ron Michelson, who was my VJO. And he was just incredible as far as helping me to put the program together and getting these veterans connected to resources within the VA. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't say almost the first thing we ran into was veterans who needed assistance, who needed resource, who didn't qualify for VA services. So the next step of the program was simply connecting with local 501c3s, even national 501c3s. We started with the DAV, the VFW, places like that, the Veteran Service Commission in our county. And we utilized the ones that were useful to us, and some weren't as good as others. We ultimately discovered the Easter Seals Veterans Thrive program in Greater Cincinnati, and they were an incredible resource to us and remain that resource to the police department today. If you have a struggling veteran that you don't know how to help, they absolutely will assign a case manager and help that way. So once again, like I say, everything is not cookie cutter. You have to determine what's available in your area and how you can do a little of maybe what we did, or maybe do better than we did. It just depends on how motivated you are. So now the slide I've put up is called the Veterans Sequential Intercept Model. I know that's a lot of words. It's a federal government kind of thing. It was put together by a group of us called the JIVN, the Justice Involved Veterans Network. And the JIVN network consists of the DOJ, it consists of the VA, it consists of the Bureau of Prisons, first responders like myself, VA resources from all over the country. And this chart is a little complicated, but I'm going to tell you exactly what I think we all need to know. This chart is about deflection. And if you look at intercept 0 and then intercept 1, you'll see there's a line between intercept 1 and intercept 2. Intercept 2 is arrest and detention. That's typically where the police and first responders come into the deflection and diversion model, is intercept 2. But one of the things I do I love doing is I travel the country teaching police departments that they don't have to be intercept 2. They can be intercept 1.5. That traffic stop that got me started in this world made me intercept 1.5. That young man did not need to go to jail. He did not need to go into the court system. He needed treatment. He needed guidance. And he needed some PTSD treatment. All of those things can occur in intercept 1. I'm not sure exactly who the audience is, but I know we've got first responders and we've got social workers. Most of you are intercept 1, and that's our goal, is pre-arrest deflection and diversion. Pre-arrest deflection and diversion. And it's not hard to do. It simply takes someone in your system to have a basic knowledge or a basic understanding of resources available to you, or even just the knowledge of who to reach out to. I mean, I'm here. I'm retired now, all kinds of free time. Unfortunately, my wife says one of my personality flaws is my inability to not answer my phone, or my inability to not respond to emails that are sent to me. So if there are questions in the state of Ohio in particular, feel free to reach out to me. I will respond to you with anything I can do to help. In Cincinnati, we use what we call the triage model. I trained my 911 call center people on asking that question: have you at any point, or anyone in your household, served this country? It's an important thing to understand at the 911 call center, because then we know who we're dispatching and what we're dispatching to. I trained my patrol units in the basics of understanding PTSD, how to recognize it and what to do with it. And they all knew that if they didn't know how to fix the problem, they could reach out to me and I would do my best. We put together the military liaison unit, which consisted of, for me, I was fortunate. Out of 1,000 sworn officers, I had over 350 military veterans in my police department, more than 150 combat veterans that I was able to utilize on radio dispatch to make a connection with veterans who were struggling in my community. My VA Veterans Justice Outreach workers, can't say enough about them. Katie Stewart and that team are just incredible. So if you have an opportunity to interact with your local VJOs, please do. Program updates. We got some national recognition, which was pretty cool. The DOJ gave us an award for innovation in policing. We had some congressional support as far as funding. They put through a bill to fund what we do. The community absolutely loved what we did. Once we became known, we started getting those third-party referrals, which was what the goal was. If we don't know about a struggling veteran, we can't help a struggling veteran. Once we became known in the community and some news stories were done, we started getting phone calls from parents of who had male or female veterans in their homes that were struggling, that needed guidance. And because we were able to go out and relate to them, we were able to make connections, make resource referrals. I was absolutely shocked at how many times I would introduce myself, tell the veteran why I was there, and then offer them assistance, and they would willingly come out and go with me. And I would personally drive them up to the VA and introduce them to whatever doctor or specialist it was that was going to help. Or I would take them to whatever program they needed to. They were willing to go. Still astounds me. And that's the veteran appreciation part. Veteran suicide. I don't want to go too long. Hey, John, can you chime in here? I know I've gone my 20 minutes. I'd be more than happy to discuss how we run into, or what we run into in the veteran suicide, but we're looking at another 10 minutes if you want me to cut it off.
No, Dave, that's fine. Go right ahead.
Okay.
We're good.
So veteran suicide, I mean, everybody here's the numbers, 22 a day, 18 a day, whatever it is, they're all too high. But I think there's a general misunderstanding of what veteran suicide really is. And when people who are not military veterans or not closely related to the military hear about a veteran suicide, their immediate assumption is that some young veteran who was in Afghanistan saw some horrible things, maybe had to do some things that were, against his morals or against his religion, and he comes home and he struggles with what happened. And 6 months later, he decides, you know what, this is just too much. I can't live with this. And he takes his own life or takes her own life. That's not even remotely close to what we were seeing. And I'm speaking about my personal experience and the interviews I've done with people throughout the veteran community. What we were actually seeing was a long-term issue developing from something very minor before suicidal ideation began. I'm going to describe that to you real quickly. It starts with something as simple as a veteran not sleeping well. So you've got a young man or a young woman who was an 8-hour a night sleeper prior to their military service or prior to their traumatic experiences. They come home from that deployment. They have some dreams. They maybe have some personal struggles, and all of a sudden they're only sleeping 4 or 5 hours a night instead of that 8 hours a night that they've had their whole life and what they're accustomed to. And that 5 hours a night, after a couple months, starts to affect their well-being, their mental well-being, their physical well-being, their job performance, things of that nature. So what the veteran typically decides to do, and this applies to first responders as well, because one of the things I do is I teach PTSD for first responders, and I want first responders to recognize this because it's the same pattern that my friends who have committed suicide followed. When they've only getting that 4 or 5 hours of sleep, they tend to self-medicate. And by self-medicate, that, for veterans, that may be narcotics, that may be alcohol, that may be whatever they choose to use to make themselves unconscious. For policemen, it tends to be alcohol. But the veterans would start to self-medicate, and then all of a sudden, hey, I'm sleeping 8 hours, or I'm not really sleeping, but I'm unconscious for 8 hours. So things are a little better. I feel more rested. I drank the shoulders off that bottle of Jack Daniels, and it helped me get a good night's rest. Well, that works for 6 or 7 months. And every night before bed, they throw down 6 or 8 or 10 shots, and they sleep better. They sleep through the night. Well, all of a sudden, 6 or 8 months later, it stops working because their body has developed a tolerance to that alcohol. And what do they have to do next? You guessed it, they have to drink more of that alcohol. So now it's not the shoulders off that bottle, it's half that bottle. In order to get the same effect they had when they started, they have to drink that half of that bottle of liquor to get a good night's sleep. So now for 6 or 8 months, it's a half a bottle of liquor a night in order to get a good night's rest. So I started this with a little bit of a sleep issue, maybe some dreams, maybe not sleeping well all night. What do you think I have now? I've got a sleep issue, and I've probably got a substance abuse issue. And once the substance abuse issue starts, and I can't sleep without the alcohol, and I can't perform without the alcohol, the work-related issues start. And when the work-related issues start, the family issues start. And the spouse, the husband or the wife says, you know what, I didn't sign on for this. You've got to quit drinking. But you can't quit drinking because now you're an alcoholic, or you can't quit shooting dope because you're addicted to the narcotics. And you're stuck in this chronic circle. So once you start out with a very small sleep issue, now you have a substance abuse issue, now you have a marital issue, now you have an employment issue. What's next? Well, the spouse decides I've had enough. and they typically leave at that point, or you're involved in the criminal justice system in some form or fashion. But when the spouse leaves, who leaves with them? The children, possessions, homes. All of these things are a long-term downhill slide and can take anywhere from 3 to 5 to 8 years, at which point the suicidal ideations start. The suicidal ideations start when the veteran reaches the point that they don't see anything positive coming in the future of their lives. Now, I'm going to tell you that at any point during this, what I call the suicide train, any point during this, as a first responder, as a social worker, as somebody in this network, you have the ability to intervene and correct those issues before they ever reach suicidal ideation. So my personal belief is that by teaching law enforcement officers and first responders across the country the pattern of suicide among veterans and first responders, that we can positively affect those numbers. So understand that you can positively affect those numbers. I'm not going to get into the 4th Street story because I know I've talked too long. I always talk too long. I'm a radio personality. I'm sorry you guys have had to look at me for half an hour. But understanding that you can step into that suicide train at any point is the key to suicide reduction, in my opinion. I'm going to show you, this is an email I got from a guy we helped. It'll all be recorded. It's all being recorded. You'll get a copy of it. You'll have time to go back and look at it. But you can be helpful. And it was emails like this that just made my career. I have the good fortune to continue to be able to help people. And if you need me or I can help you, let me know. Here's my contact information. I will respond to you if you call or text or need me in any way. John, I want to thank you for inviting me to participate. The more we can do to spread this message and teach people that they can step into these issues and help these young men and women with their lives, the better off we are. So thank you.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, Sergeant. I want to thank you, both you and Justice Stratton, for the work you're doing to support our vets. They've sacrificed so much for us, and even, and as are the active duty folks now. Just they sacrifice so much for us, and we really need to support them when they come home and when they're deployed. So I really, really, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for what you guys are doing. It's really, really important that we take care of these people. So that being said, I hope you all enjoyed our webinar today. We will be sending out the recording to everybody who was in attendance and everybody who registered. We also will be sending out 1 CEU for attending this webinar. We will send a follow-up email, and attached to that email will be a survey. We ask that anyone, please fill it out. But if you're interested in obtaining a CEU for this, please take the survey so we will know who to get the CEU certificate to. So I think that concludes our webinar for today. I hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you again to our 2 speakers. And please stay tuned for next month announcements of another webinar. So I hope you all have a great day, and take care. Bye-bye.